The metal barrier slammed down with a thunderous crash, blocking her path completely. Karen stood there, keys dangling from her shaking hand, staring at the solid steel beam that had just destroyed her entire world of entitlement. Her face went from confused to furious in 3 seconds flat. "You cannot do this to me," she screamed, her voice cracking with rage. "I will sue you for everything you have." But I was ready for this moment. I had been planning it for months. Every document, every photograph, every witness statement was filed away in my evidence folder. As she pounded her fists against the immovable barrier, I realized something that made my heart race with satisfaction. Karen had finally met her match. And this time there was no way around it, no loophole to exploit, no authority figure to manipulate. The boom barrier did not care about her tears, her threats, or her sense of entitlement. That is when I knew I had won. My name is David, and I work 60 hours a week as a project manager at a construction company. Every morning at 6, I leave my small suburban home and do not return until after dark. I am not rich, but I pay my mortgage on time, keep my lawn trimmed, and take pride in what I have built for myself. My driveway means everything to me. I saved for 2 years to have it professionally paved and sealed. The smooth black asphalt gleams in the sunlight, marked with crisp white lines that I painted myself. It is not much, but it represents something important. It represents ownership, responsibility, and respect for what belongs to you. That is why my blood boiled the first time I saw her silver SUV parked right across my driveway entrance. I had just finished a 14-hour day dealing with delayed shipments and angry contractors. All I wanted was to pull into my own driveway, grab some food from the fridge, and collapse on my couch. Instead, I found myself blocked by a massive luxury vehicle that cost more than I make in a year. The SUV belonged to Karen Mitchell, who lived 3 houses down from me. I had seen her around the neighborhood before, always dressed in expensive workout clothes, always talking loudly on her phone, always treating the world like it existed solely for her convenience. I parked on the street and walked over to her house. Karen answered the door with an annoyed expression, like I was interrupting something important. "Excuse me," I said politely. "Your car is blocking my driveway. Could you please move it?" Karen glanced past me toward her SUV, then shrugged. "Oh, that. I am just visiting the Hendersons next door. I will move it when I am done." "When will that be?" I asked. "I have been working all day and I just want to park in my own driveway." She looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "It will not kill you to park on the street for one night. I am having an important conversation here." The door closed in my face. I stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. This woman had blocked my private property, then acted like I was the problem for asking her to move. My hands clenched into fists as I walked back to my truck. 2 hours later, her SUV was still there. I knocked on the Hendersons' door, but no one answered. I could see lights on inside and hear laughter coming from the backyard. Karen was having a good time while I sat on my couch, staring out the window at my blocked driveway. When I woke up the next morning, the SUV was gone. I thought maybe it was a one-time thing, a misunderstanding that would not happen again. I was wrong. 3 days later, she did it again. This time, she parked even more carelessly, leaving her back end sticking out into the street. When I confronted her, she waved me off like I was an annoying child. "Relax," she said. "It is just a driveway. You act like I killed your dog or something." That was the moment I realized Karen Mitchell had no intention of changing her behavior. She saw my property as her personal convenience, and my objections as unreasonable whining. I also realized something else. This was not going to end well for one of us. Over the next month, Corinne's parking became a regular nightmare. What started as occasional inconvenience turned into a calculated pattern of disrespect. She would park in my driveway 2 or 3 times per week, sometimes for entire afternoons, sometimes overnight. I started keeping a notebook by my front door. Every incident got recorded with date, time, duration, and photographs. Monday, March 15th, 2:30 p.m. to 7:45 p.m. Wednesday, March 17th, 6:00 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. Saturday, March 20th, 10:00 a.m. to 8:00 p.m. The worst part was discovering what she was actually doing. Corinne was not just visiting the Hendersons. She was using my driveway as her personal parking space while she made social rounds throughout the neighborhood. I watched through my window as she parked, walked 3 houses in the opposite direction to visit the Kowalskis, then spent hours gossiping on their front porch. My driveway had become her preferred parking spot because it was centrally located and convenient for her social schedule. She had turned my private property into her personal parking lot without asking, without permission, without any consideration for how it affected my life. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in April. I had an important meeting with potential investors for a project that could make or break my career. The meeting was scheduled for 8 a.m. sharp, and I had spent weeks preparing my presentation. I walked outside at 7:30 to find Corinne's SUV blocking my driveway again. This time, she had parked so carelessly that I could not even squeeze my truck around her. I was completely trapped. I sprinted to her house and pounded on the door. No answer. I called her phone number, which I had gotten from the neighborhood directory, straight to voicemail. I ran to the Hendersons' house, the Kowalskis' house, anywhere she might be visiting. Nothing. By the time I finally tracked her down at a coffee shop 15 minutes away, I was 30 minutes late for the most important meeting of my year. She was sitting at a corner table, laughing with her friends, completely oblivious to the chaos she had caused. "Corinne, your car is blocking my driveway, and I missed a crucial business meeting because of it," I said, trying to keep my voice level. She looked up at me with mild annoyance. "Why are you bothering me at breakfast? Can this not wait until later?" "No, it cannot wait. I need you to move your car right now, and I need you to stop parking in my driveway." Her friend stopped talking and stared at me. Corinne's face flushed red with embarrassment. "You are making a scene," she hissed. "I will move it when I am ready to move it." "Move it now, or I am calling the police." Corinne stood up abruptly. "Go ahead and call them. I will tell them you are harassing me. You have no right to tell me where I can and cannot park." That afternoon, I started talking to other neighbors. What I discovered made my stomach turn. Corinne had been terrorizing half the neighborhood with similar behavior. She parked in the Johnsons' driveway when she visited their backyard neighbors. She blocked Mrs. Chen's mailbox every Wednesday when she went to her book club. She had even parked in front of the fire hydrant on Elm Street because it was closer to her friend's house. Every neighbor had the same story. They had tried talking to her politely. She had dismissed their concerns, made excuses, or outright ignored them. Most had given up and just accepted it as something they had to live with. "She threatened to call the HOA on me when I complained," Mrs. Chen told me. "Said I was being hostile to neighbors and creating conflict in the community." She told the Johnsons that parking restrictions are fascist and that property lines are just suggestions, another neighbor added. I realized I was dealing with someone who had no respect for other people's rights, no understanding of basic social boundaries, and no intention of changing her behavior voluntarily. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. If Karen wanted to play games with my property, I was going to change the rules of the game. I spent the next 3 weeks diving deep into research, property law, municipal codes, HOA regulations, and every legal option available to homeowners dealing with parking disputes. I read court cases, studied ordinances, and contacted local authorities to understand exactly what rights I had as a property owner. The answers were encouraging. My driveway was private property. Karen had no legal right to park there, regardless of how convenient it was for her social life. Blocking someone's driveway was considered trespassing in our municipality, and repeated offenses could result in fines and even criminal charges. I called the non-emergency police line to ask about enforcement options. Officer Martinez was patient and helpful. "You have every right to control access to your private driveway," he explained. "You can install gates, barriers, or other physical obstacles as long as they meet local building codes and do not violate HOA restrictions." That conversation led me down a new research path. Physical barriers. Gates were expensive and required permanent modification to my property. Chains could be cut or moved. Parking cones could be kicked aside. Then I discovered boom barriers. Boom barriers are the automated metal arms you see at parking garages and toll booths. They are designed to control vehicle access to restricted areas. They are strong enough to stop a car, automated enough to operate with remote controls, and professional enough to make a clear statement about property boundaries. I spent hours watching installation videos and reading product specifications. Heavy-duty models could withstand significant impact without damage. Remote-controlled systems allowed operation from inside the house. Solar-powered options eliminated the need for electrical work. The more I researched, the more perfect the solution seemed. A boom barrier would solve the parking problem definitively while staying completely within legal boundaries. Karen could not claim it was harassment or intimidation. It was simply a property owner controlling access to their own land. I contacted 3 different contractors who specialized in barrier installations. The quotes ranged from $1,500 to $3,000, depending on the model and features. It was expensive, but not more expensive than missing important business meetings or dealing with ongoing harassment. The contractor I chose was named Bill Rodriguez. He had been installing security barriers for 15 years and understood exactly what I was trying to accomplish. "I get calls like this every month," Bill told me during our consultation. "Usually, it is business owners dealing with people who treat their parking lots like public space. But residential installations are becoming more common as neighborhoods get more crowded." Bill walked my property line and took measurements. He explained that the barrier would be installed entirely on my property, with the pivot point anchored in concrete and the arm extending across my driveway entrance. When activated, it would create a solid steel barrier that no vehicle could pass. "The model I recommend for your situation weighs about 200 pounds and is designed to stop vehicles traveling up to 30 miles per hour, Bill explained. "It operates with a wireless remote control and has a manual override in case of power failure or emergency." While Bill handled the technical planning, I worked on building my evidence file. Every photograph, every documented incident, every witness statement went into a 3-ring binder that I kept locked in my home office. I recorded every conversation with Karen, saved every voicemail she left, and documented every instance of property violation. I also made one final attempt to resolve the situation diplomatically. I drafted a formal letter explaining the problem and requesting that Karen stop parking in my driveway. I had it notarized and delivered by certified mail to create an official record of my attempt to handle things peacefully. Karen's response came 3 days later in the form of her SUV parked across my driveway with a handwritten note under the windshield wiper. "This is a free country. Deal with it." That note went straight into my evidence file, along with photographs of her vehicle blocking my property yet again. I called Bill Rodriguez the same afternoon. "I am ready to move forward with the installation," I told him. "When do you want to schedule it?" "As soon as possible." Bill chuckled. "I can tell this has been building up for a while. How about next Tuesday? I will need about 4 hours to complete the installation and test all the systems." "Perfect," I said. "And Bill, I want you to make sure this thing is built to last. I have a feeling it is going to get tested pretty thoroughly." "Do not worry," Bill replied. "When I am done, nothing short of a tank is getting through that barrier without permission." I marked Tuesday on my calendar and started counting down the days. Tuesday morning arrived gray and cloudy, but my mood was bright with anticipation. Bill Rodriguez showed up at exactly 8 a.m. with a work truck full of equipment and 2 assistants. I took the day off work to supervise the installation and document everything with photographs. The boom barrier system was more impressive than I had imagined. The main support post was a massive steel column that would be anchored 4 feet deep in concrete. The barrier arm itself was a 12-foot length of reinforced aluminum designed to withstand significant impact without bending or breaking. "This model is rated for commercial use," Bill explained as his crew began digging the foundation hole. "It will stop anything short of a delivery truck, and even then it would probably win the fight." The installation process was methodical and professional. They dug the hole with precision, mixed the concrete to exact specifications, and positioned the support post with laser levels to ensure perfect alignment. The barrier arm attached with heavy-duty hinges and a motorized lifting mechanism controlled by wireless remote. While the concrete cured, Bill installed the control system. A small solar panel mounted on my garage roof powered the motor and electronics. The wireless remote was small enough to fit on my keychain but had a range of over 100 feet. "You can operate it from inside your house if you want to," Bill demonstrated. "Just point and click. The arm goes up, the arm goes down." By noon, the system was fully operational. Bill ran me through several test cycles, showing me how to raise and lower the barrier, how to use the manual override, and how to replace the remote battery when needed. "Remember," he said as he packed up his tools, "this barrier is now part of your property security system. Anyone who damages it or attempts to force their way past it is committing criminal mischief and trespassing. Make sure you have cameras covering the area and keep documenting everything." The crew finished cleanup and left around 2 p.m. I stood in my driveway admiring their work. The boom barrier looked professional and permanent, like something you would see at a government facility or private business. When lowered, it created an unmistakable message. This is private property and access is controlled. I did not have to wait long to see how Corinne would react. She showed up at exactly 4:30, driving her usual route through the neighborhood to visit friends. I was watching through my front window when her silver SUV turned the corner and headed toward my house. I could see the exact moment she noticed the barrier. Her SUV slowed to a crawl as she processed what she was seeing. She stopped completely about 20 feet away, engine idling, staring at the metal arm blocking her usual parking spot. For almost a full minute she just sat there. I could imagine the thoughts racing through her mind. Confusion, disbelief, and growing rage as she realized what had happened. Then she got out of her car. Karen walked up to the barrier like she was approaching a dangerous animal. She examined the support post, tested the weight of the arm, and looked around for some obvious way to move or bypass it. That was when I decided to make my appearance. I walked outside casually, remote control in my hand, and approached the barrier from my side. "Good afternoon, Karen," I said pleasantly. She spun around to face me, her expression a mixture of confusion and anger. "What is this thing?" she demanded, pointing at the barrier. "It is a boom barrier," I replied. "I had it installed to control access to my private driveway." "You cannot do this." "Actually, I can. This is my property, and I have every right to control who parks here." Karen's face was turning red. "This is insane. You are blocking the whole neighborhood just because you are mad about parking." "I am not blocking the neighborhood," I corrected. "I am blocking my private driveway. If you want to visit the Hendersons or anyone else, you can park on the street like everyone else." She stared at me for a long moment, then walked over and tried to lift the barrier arm with her hands. It did not budge. "How do you get in and out?" she asked. I held up the remote control. "With this." The realization hit her like a physical blow. She could no longer use my driveway as her personal parking space. Her convenient shortcut through my property had been permanently eliminated. "This is harassment," she screamed. "I am calling the police." "Go ahead," I said calmly. "Officer Martinez is familiar with the situation. He knows I installed this barrier legally on my own property." Karen's hands were shaking with rage. "You think you are so smart, but I will find a way around this. I will make your life miserable." "The only thing making my life miserable was you parking in my driveway without permission," I replied. "Now that problem is solved." She stormed back to her SUV and drove away, but not before screaming out her window, "This is not over." I watched her disappear around the corner, then looked back at my boom barrier standing guard over my driveway. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe normally again. Karen's retaliation began within 24 hours and came from multiple directions simultaneously. She had apparently spent the entire night developing a strategy to make my life as difficult as possible. The first attack came through the HOA. I found a formal complaint notice in my mailbox the next morning, alleging that my boom barrier violated neighborhood aesthetic standards and created safety hazards for emergency vehicles. The complaint was signed by Karen and demanded immediate removal of the illegal obstruction. 2 hours later, a police cruiser pulled into my driveway. Officer Martinez got out, examined the barrier, and shook his head with amusement. "Let me guess," he said. "Your neighbor called us about your new parking barrier." "What did she tell you?" "She filed a report claiming you installed an illegal roadblock that prevents her from accessing public streets. She also accused you of threatening her with a weapon." My stomach dropped. "A weapon? What weapon?" Officer Martinez pulled out his notepad. "According to her statement, you pointed a dangerous remote control device at her and threatened to use it if she did not leave the area." I stared at him for a moment, then started laughing. I could not help it. The absurdity of the accusation was overwhelming. "Officer, the remote control operates the barrier. I showed it to her when she asked how it worked. I never threatened her with anything." "I figured as much," Martinez replied. "But I have to follow up on all reports. Can you show me how the system works? I demonstrated the barrier operation while Martinez took notes. He measured the distance from the property line, verified that the entire installation was on my land, and confirmed that emergency vehicles could still access my property when the barrier was raised. Everything looks legal to me, he concluded. You are well within your rights as a property owner. However, I should warn you that filing false reports is a crime. If this pattern continues, your neighbor could face charges. The HOA board meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday. I spent the week preparing my defense, gathering documents that proved the barrier met all architectural standards and posed no safety hazards. At the meeting, Karen arrived with a folder full of photographs and what appeared to be a prepared speech. She stood before the five-member board and launched into a passionate presentation about how my barrier was destroying the neighborhood's character. This ugly industrial eyesore makes our street look like a prison compound, she declared. Property values will plummet if we allow homeowners to install military-style barricades whenever they feel like it. When it was my turn to speak, I calmly presented my evidence file. Months of documented parking violations, photographs of Karen's SUV blocking my driveway, records of my attempts to resolve the situation diplomatically. Karen has been trespassing on my property regularly for over 6 months, I explained. I tried talking to her multiple times. I sent a certified letter requesting that she stop. She responded by escalating her behavior and leaving threatening notes on my windshield. Board member Janet Stevens reviewed my documentation with obvious interest. Mrs. Mitchell, do you have any response to these allegations? Karen's face turned bright red. He is exaggerating everything. I only parked there a few times when I was visiting neighbors. He is making it sound like I was living in his driveway. I opened my evidence binder to the incident log. March 15th, 5 hours and 15 minutes. March 17th, 5 hours and 30 minutes. March 20th, 10 hours. March 22nd. That is enough, interrupted Board Chairman Robert Kim. Mrs. Mitchell, these records show a clear pattern of property violations. Mr. Davis had every right to install barriers on his own land to prevent unauthorized parking. The vote was unanimous. The barrier could stay. But Karen was not finished. Over the next 2 weeks, she filed noise complaints claiming the barrier motor was too loud. She reported me to the city for operating an unlicensed commercial parking facility. She even contacted my employer to complain that I was creating neighborhood conflicts that reflected poorly on the company. Each complaint was investigated and dismissed. The barrier was quiet, legal, and entirely residential. My employer's human resources department called to let me know about Karen's complaint and to assure me that it would have no impact on my job. We get calls like this occasionally, the HR director explained, usually from disgruntled neighbors or family members trying to cause problems. We document them but do not take action unless there are legitimate workplace issues involved. By the end of the month, Karen had filed 7 different complaints with 4 different agencies. Every single one was dismissed or withdrawn after investigation revealed that I had broken no laws and violated no regulations. The final straw came when she started approaching other neighbors with wild stories about my dangerous behavior and illegal barrier installation. She was trying to build a coalition against me, but her campaign backfired spectacularly. Instead of gaining allies, her desperate lies exposed her as the real problem in the neighborhood. Karen's behavior reached dangerous new levels when she decided that if she could not park in my driveway, She would make sure no one else could access their property either. Her escalation began with petty harassment, but quickly spiraled into actions that threatened public safety. The first incident happened on a Saturday morning when the Hendersons were having their elderly grandmother visit. Corinne deliberately parked her SUV in a way that blocked not just my driveway, but also made it nearly impossible for other cars to navigate the narrow street. When Mrs. Henderson asked her to move so they could help her grandmother with her wheelchair, Corinne refused. "If David can block access with his stupid barrier, then I can park wherever I want," she announced loudly enough for half the neighborhood to hear. But the incident that changed everything happened 3 weeks later on a Wednesday evening. My neighbor Tom Walsh's 8-year-old daughter Emma had a severe allergic reaction to something she ate at dinner. Tom called 911 and ran outside to wait for the ambulance while his wife Sarah stayed inside with Emma, who was having trouble breathing. The ambulance arrived within 6 minutes, but it could not reach the Walsh house because Corinne had parked her SUV in a position that blocked the street. The paramedics had to park 50 yards away and run to the house carrying their medical equipment. Those extra minutes could have been the difference between life and death. Tom was beside himself with rage when he realized what had happened. While the paramedics worked on Emma, he pounded on Corinne's door demanding that she move her car immediately. Corinne answered the door in her bathrobe, acting annoyed that someone was bothering her so late in the evening. "There is an ambulance trying to reach my daughter and your car is blocking the street," Tom shouted. "That is not my problem," Corinne replied. "I am parked legally on a public street. My daughter could die because of your selfishness. Do not blame me for your family's medical emergencies," she said, and started to close the door. That was when Tom lost control. He started screaming at Corinne, calling her every name he could think of, telling her exactly what kind of person blocks emergency vehicles to make a point about parking disputes. By this time, other neighbors had emerged from their houses to see what was happening. They saw the ambulance, they saw Tom's desperation, and they saw Corinne's complete indifference to a child's medical emergency. Mrs. Chen started recording with her phone. The Johnson family came outside and began shouting at Corinne to move her car. Even elderly Mr. Peterson, who normally avoided confrontation, walked over and started telling Corinne exactly what he thought of her behavior. Finally, under pressure from the entire neighborhood, Corinne moved her SUV. But the damage to her reputation was complete and irreversible. The neighborhood association called an emergency meeting for the following Sunday. Every household was invited to discuss ongoing safety concerns and community standards. Corinne showed up to that meeting expecting to defend herself, but instead walked into a public trial where she was the only defendant. Tom Walsh spoke first, describing how Corinne's deliberate parking choices had nearly prevented his daughter from receiving emergency medical care. His voice shook with emotion as he talked about watching paramedics run 50 yards carrying life-saving equipment, because one person in the neighborhood thought her convenience was more important than everyone else's safety. Mrs. Chen played the video she had recorded, showing Corinne's callous response to Tom's pleas for help. The recording captured her exact words: "That is not my problem, and do not blame me for your family's medical emergencies." One by one, other neighbors stood up to share their own stories. The Johnsons talked about Corinne blocking their mailbox delivery. Mrs. Chen described weeks of harassment over parking complaints. Even families I barely knew had stories about Corinne's entitled behavior and complete disregard for community standards. When it was Corinne's turn to respond, She stood up and delivered what can only be described as a complete meltdown. Instead of apologizing or showing any recognition of how her behavior had affected others, she launched into a furious rant about how everyone was ganging up on her unfairly. "You are all just jealous because I have a nice car and nice clothes," she screamed. "David started this whole thing with his ridiculous barrier, and now you are all taking his side because you hate successful people." The room fell silent. Corinne looked around at the faces staring back at her and seemed to realize for the first time that she had no supporters left. "Fine," she shouted. "If you all want to treat me like a criminal for parking on public streets, then maybe I should start acting like one." She stormed out of the meeting, leaving behind a room full of neighbors who finally understood they were dealing with someone completely detached from reality. The association voted unanimously to send a formal letter to the HOA board, requesting enhanced parking enforcement and community behavior standards. They also agreed to establish a neighborhood watch program to document and report any future harassment or safety violations. Corinne had succeeded in uniting the entire neighborhood, just not in the way she had intended. The final chapter of the Corinne saga unfolded over the following month, with a series of consequences that I could never have imagined when I first installed that boom barrier. The police investigation into Corinne's pattern of behavior resulted in multiple citations for filing false reports, harassment, and creating public safety hazards. The emergency vehicle incident alone carried a $500 fine and a formal warning that future violations could result in criminal charges. Corinne tried to fight the citations in court, but the evidence against her was overwhelming. Mrs. Chen's video, the testimonies from multiple neighbors, and my detailed documentation created an airtight case that even Corinne's expensive lawyer could not challenge effectively. The judge was particularly unimpressed with Corinne's defense that she was the victim of neighborhood harassment. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said during the hearing, "blocking emergency vehicles is not a parking dispute. It is a public safety violation that could have resulted in serious harm to a child. Your actions show a complete disregard for community welfare and basic human decency." Corinne was ordered to pay all fines, complete 40 hours of community service, and undergo anger management counseling. She was also issued a restraining order that prohibited her from approaching my property or interfering with neighborhood parking areas. The legal consequences were just the beginning of Corinne's downfall. Word of her behavior spread beyond our immediate neighborhood through social media and local news coverage of the emergency vehicle incident. Her employer, a high-end real estate agency, received dozens of complaints from potential clients who recognized her name from news reports. Within 2 months, Corinne lost her job. Her husband, who had remained largely absent during the parking disputes, filed for divorce and moved out of their house. Her adult children stopped visiting after years of excusing her increasingly erratic behavior finally became too embarrassing to defend. Corinne herself seemed to recognize that she had burned every bridge in the community. 6 months after the boom barrier installation, she put her house on the market and moved away. I never learned where she went, and frankly, I did not care. My boom barrier remained exactly where Bill Rodriguez had installed it, standing guard over my driveway like a steel sentinel. It had never been damaged, never malfunctioned, and never failed to do its job. More importantly, it had become a symbol of something bigger than just parking enforcement. Other neighbors, inspired by my success, began setting clearer boundaries with their own problematic neighbors. The Johnsons installed security cameras after years of package theft. Mrs. Chen started a community group focused on property rights education. Even Tom Walsh, who had always been conflict-averse, began speaking up when he saw unfair treatment in the neighborhood. Property values in our area actually increased over the following year, partly due to improved community cohesion and the elimination of the harassment issues that had been driving families away. Every morning when I leave for work, I use my remote control to raise the barrier and drive out of my driveway. Every evening when I return, I lower it back into place. It has become such a natural part of my routine that I barely think about it anymore. But sometimes, usually on quiet Sunday afternoons, I stand in my perfectly maintained driveway and remember the satisfaction of watching that steel arm slam down for the first time. I remember Corinne's face when she realized her reign of entitlement was over. That boom barrier taught me something important about dealing with bullies. Sometimes being polite and reasonable is not enough. Sometimes you have to build a wall.